I'm Cesar Delgado from Back Roads of Illinois podcast. Welcome to the show with us for this afternoon's Markets Close with Sam Hudson out of Brimfield, Illinois for Corn Belt Marketing. Sam is the Vice President for Corn Belt Marketing out of Brimfield, Illinois. Good afternoon. How are you today, Sam?
Doing good, Cesar. Thanks for
Welcome
having
to
me.
the show with us for today again. I'm enjoying to have you once again.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm glad we could do it this afternoon, and kind of a quiet time in markets, but always something to talk about.
Let's go ahead to talk about the markets in today's close bell and the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report is coming out for tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Central Time. What are you looking for this report?
Well, I think you look at kind of a quiet affair. We don't have any crop production updates tomorrow, and so I think it's going to be more focused on what South American production updates we get. And because it's so early still in their production cycle, USDA is going to be slow to come down. So I think the trade's going to be looking for that already. And the supply and demand estimates here domestically can't probably change enough to provide a big splash. So I think we go right back into headline-driven trade and money flow trade as we get into the end of the year.
We know that the report is going to be bearish. What do you expect for January's report because of the harvest season is moving forward to look for high yield in Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Minnesota? Could you tell to our listeners about that?
Yeah, I think that the fact that we had timely rains this year was the biggest thing. The amounts, you'd look at it most areas and you'd wonder, how we produced as big of a crop as we did. But I think save for a few holes, this year's crop was a lot more like Swiss cheese compared to last year, where it was just a complete disaster out, west of the Missouri, especially. And so the fact that we're able to grab those and some of this better producing ground on top of it, if you got those kind of conditions on lower PI rated soil, it's going to have a lot more stress. But I think the areas and locations that it happened in, was critical in the outcome of what we actually found. And so I think that's the cloud above the market. The fact that we're not going to run out of this stuff before March 1st. And if South America raises a big one, we certainly won't run out of it before June or July either. So I think that's what we're going to be chewing on. And I think that keeps the corn market, pretty quiet, maybe in a 40-cent range throughout winter.
How are the grain market for today's close bell in downtown Chicago?
We got a little bit of a bounce day before the report tomorrow. Beans were up a little bit. They've taken the edge off though over the last month or so, and traded beans almost $1 off the highs here recently. While corn is kind of finding a little bit of a drift higher on the heels of wheat. We're seeing a lot of short covering there, a lot of big fund short interest and large commercial ownership. So that combination to me has been a tinderbox, and we've been working higher. And if we can exceed the 100-day moving average, we could see additional short coverage, and that would provide additional opportunity in corn. But otherwise, there's not a lot a fundamental drive. I think again, it's going to be up to geopolitics, headlines, and money flow.
Now that we were going to talk about the livestock market for today.
Man, it's been rough. Technically it's been rough for the last month or so. It's only gotten worse. We are starting to see a little bit of strength in some of the feeder spreads and spreads in general. Hopefully that can lead the market back higher. You'd think it would have one more charge left in it here before the second quarter of next year, but the outside money has just completely gotten off the boat. Open interest fallen a lot, fund length fallen a lot, lowest ownership in the cattle market in over a year now. And so if we have a reason to bring them back in, I think we could find a breath of life, but I think you're going to have a lot of producers, cognizant of prices if we get that.
What is your opinion on the cattle herd? It's extremely expanded to include the cattle markets. Could you tell
Yeah.
to our listeners how much see you on these cattle markets for now until next December?
Well, I think the theme here, into harvest is the fervor and the fodder that producers have to load the pens up again. And obviously, we've seen that reflected in placement numbers, which have been considerably large, even larger than expectations, and that's been part of the pressure on the market. And you look at that twofold. I think it's the fact that we've got readily available feed finally again, especially out west in these areas where it was such a tough going last year. But also their grass conditions are improving considerably, and so it's going to put a little bit of confidence in finally keeping more cattle around and expanding that herd size. But it doesn't happen overnight, and obviously the big question is what does demand do in the meantime while we're figuring all that out. If you have economic problems in the next year, then that could curtail price a little bit faster than even just supply on its own.
Yes.
I think it was something about 60.
Finally, what is your opinion on the corn yields for this year in central Illinois near Peoria between Macon, Bloomington, the Quad Cities area?
Pretty phenomenal. As I mentioned, despite the fact that we were rainfall deficit for most of the year, really for all of bulk of May and June, and even big part of August. July was a savior to us. But again, the fact that it happened on good soils there, I think that it was able to keep those crops in there fighting. Obviously, the genetics have come there a long way. And you get into the lower PI rated soil and some of the rolling hills and timber soil, and we didn't see the same results. And so I think that's the year-on-year drop. But at the end of the day, to see Illinois, over 200 or 201 as a state is pretty phenomenal. As you get closer to, the Illinois-Iowa state line into eastern Iowa, I think those yields were considerably less. They just didn't get the same rain that we did in July, and so I think that really held them back. But again, on the whole, the fact that we got out with what we did with the weather that we had, I think is impressive. And we have that factor mental factor and the psychology of it all working against us as we talk about South American crops and how quickly they could go backward, and really just moving forward in the future and how quickly we write those losses down.
Is there anything would you like to go to tell our listeners about January's report on next month? If they have any concerns about trend yield on the world agricultural supply and demand estimate report.
Well, one thing I would say is I would prepare for an increased volatility, particularly in the soybean market. If there's any space where we could create a little bit of concern, it would be on the beans domestically. You got stocks usage closer to 5%. Compare that to corn, almost double that at 10%, and wheat, over 30%. So if you have a production problem in South America, it's certainly going to, be to the nth degree in soybeans. And so, the fact that we continue to export and ship ahead of USDA schedule, and they're having these problems down there and the crops are coming down, that creates that volatility, because until we see reason for China to cancel, be a normal weather pattern from here on out, the trade almost has to write that down and assume that it's going to happen. And so all of a sudden you can get into the thought process where you could see that bean carryout drop to 120 million maybe by summer, or even as high as the 300 plus if we see a bunch of cancellations. So I think that's going to create that pathway to a lot of volatility. Whereas corn, I think it's going to be very subdued between now and March 1st. Once you get a lot of those bushels fought out of the farmer's hands for cash flow, then I think we can put a bigger move in the market. But it's just going to take time, and I think it's more about how quickly those estimates come down, not whether or not they do.
It's been so not so good.
Yeah, you're right. It's been a tough start, but it's a big area and it doesn't all die overnight. So case in point, the US.
My pleasure that you joined the show for today. Thanks. You're welcome to join the show anytime.
Thanks, Cesar. Appreciate it.
This is Sam Hudson out of Brimfield, Illinois for Corn Belt Market Incorporated from back roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. Have a good day.